Hey, what's going on everybody? It's Joseph from ScreenBite, and today I wanted to run a little bit of a test. What would be the best 50mm equivalent that you can get on the GH5 for under $200? To do this test, I'm going to be pitting three lenses up against each other. The 7 Artisans 25mm f1.8 that we reviewed last week. You can check it up in the iCard up top. Or we're going to go with the Panasonic 25mm f1.8, which can be picked up anywhere for pretty much 150 bucks. Or do we go classic and try out our Canon Fd mount 28mm f2.8 lens to see which one of these reigns supreme in image quality? Let's go ahead and run them tests. So starting it off with an edge sharpness test, I wanted to start with the 7 Artisans. Possibly the weakest of the three here. As you can see, the center sharpness is very strong with this lens. However, as soon as you start to move towards the edges, things start to get not quite as sharp. You really start to see what I'm talking about when you zoom into a 200% crop. As you can see, the closer you get to the center, which is towards the right, the sharper it is. However, that Batman is very out of focus on the text. Next up, we have the Panasonic lens, the 25mm, which is also the most expensive lens on our list here. As you can see, the sharpness in the center is just as good as on the 7 Artisans, and it does hold up a little bit better on the edges. I can accentuate this a little bit more by zooming in, and as you can see, when we compared the 7 Artisans to the 25mm, the sharpness on those edges is quite a bit sharper. However, not severely. Now moving on to the sharpest image of the bunch, that comes from the Canon 28mm FD lens. As you can see, center sharpness is strong and that carries all the way to the edges on this one. So if you're in it for sharpness, this might definitely be your lens. However, that actually changes when you zoom into a 300% crop. All three lenses are actually quite close to each other. However, I will give the edge to the FD lens because it does look a little bit sharper to my eye. However, bear in mind that when it comes to cinematography, lens sharpness isn't all that matters. So I took the lenses outside to capture a similar scene to test how close you can focus as well as to get an overall feel for detail. As you can see on the 7 Artisans lens, I mentioned in my previous review that this is one of the closest focusing lenses I've ever used. You really can get quite up in front of this lens and really capture a lot of detail, so it's good for macro, and the colors and detail do look good. Now moving along to our Panasonic lens, you can't get as close as with the 7 Artisans, however the image quality and the detail is definitely on par, if not better than you were getting on that 7 Artisans lens. Now the colors look great and I just don't have a whole lot of bad things to say about the image quality that you can get from this. And finally, moving on to the FD lens, as you can see, you can get pretty close, but not as close as on the 7 Artisans lens. But the colors on this lens do look a lot better to me, in my personal opinion. Other than that, though, the detail on all three of these lenses are pretty similar. So let's go ahead and move on to Bokeh now and see how these handle that. So as I mentioned in my 7 Artisans review, I really love the bokeh that you can get. Those 11 aperture blades definitely play a part in making that nice and circular, and you can really get some nice bokeh. Now with the Panasonic lens, very similar, you can get some decent circular bokeh. However, I'm just not a fan of focus by wire systems on lenses, which I'll touch on in a little bit. It does make getting that bokeh a little bit more difficult, but overall it does look really nice on camera. And with our Canon Fd lens, you do get a very similar bokeh that you do with the Panasonic. However, I do like focusing with this lens a lot more, so I found it a little bit more enjoyable. But from an image standpoint, it pretty much looks exactly the same. Alright, so to be completely honest with you, there's not a huge difference when it comes to image quality between these three lenses, and that's to be expected. These are just pieces of glass that get mounted to a sensor. Your sensor and your camera are going to be what gives you the most difference in your image quality. However, there are several defining features of each of these lenses that really helps you make a decision. I'll start with the 7 Artisans. Now, I really love this lens. It's $70, which is extremely inexpensive. The build quality is fantastic, and it has a declicked aperture ring, which is really great, especially if you want to graduate to cinema lenses someday. However, it is extremely small, which makes it very hard to handle when it comes to actually focusing. And for the focusing ring itself, it's very, very short, so it's hard to get that fine focus when you're really trying to get really into that detail. Now, with the Panasonic lens, it's very hard to justify it because it is the most expensive lens on our list here, $150. Now, that's not expensive in the grand scheme of things, but when you're trying to keep the cost down, I can't really justify the image quality that you're going to get because it's pretty much on par with lenses that are a third or half of the cost. However, one of the benefits that can be seen here is the fact that it is electronic, which means you can control the different settings of the lens within the camera, which is something that you can't do with the other two. However, with it being fully electronic, this lens also has what's called a focus by wire system, which I just cannot stand when it comes to trying to shoot video. Basically, that just means that the focusing is actually handled electronically, so unless you're set to manual focusing mode, if you turn the ring, it's not going to change focus at all, which can be quite annoying because you have to make sure that you're always in the right setting. And lastly, we have the Canon Fd lens, and this is my personal recommendation. A few of the benefits is that since it's an older lens, it is actually quite inexpensive to pick these up. I believe I bought this one for $35 on eBay. Now, you can also get a 24mm, which will be closer to that 25mm focal distance, but I didn't have one of those on hand. However, with that low cost, it also gives you a pretty great lens. It has some of the best colors and best image quality that I can see, especially compared to the Panasonic 25mm, as well as the focus ring is very precise and you have a large focusing area on the lens, which means you can get that fine focus, which is something that you couldn't do with these 7 Artisans. Now, keep in mind, this is a fully manual lens, so if you are a vlogger, it might not be the best lens for you because you're not going to have anything like autofocus or controlling the aperture within the camera or anything like that. Also, this lens is not as fast as the other two. You can only stop it down to F2.8, which means it's not going to perform as well as in low light as the other two. A smaller issue here is keep in mind that since this is a Canon FD lens, you are going to need to buy a separate adapter in order to adapt it to the GH5. However, once you have that adapter, it's not that big of a deal. And there you have it. Those are 3 inexpensive lenses that you can pick up for your Panasonic GH5 right now. I really am happy with all the image quality that I'm able to get from all 3 of these lenses, and I really would recommend doing your research and don't just take my decision as your end-all be-all. However, if you are looking for something inexpensive, you can definitely get some pretty good image quality. But that's going to go ahead and do it for this video, guys. So thank you once again for watching. As always, if you liked it, make sure to show it by hitting that like button down below. It really helps me out. As well as if you are new to the channel and you like the content, feel free to subscribe. You can also ask any questions in the comment section down below or on Twitter at ScreenBite. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.